Hello and welcome to Across the Pond WNBA, back for another week of action from the W. With me, as always, is Michelle Snow. Michelle, how is your week going?
Amazing. Back for another fun episode. Tons of news to share with the fans. So I'm excited.
Yes, last week's episode was always quite a heavy one in terms of talking about mental health, but a conversation that definitely needs to be had a lot more of. And moving forward, we will integrate that into the shows also. However, this week, let's get on to basketball. It has been a huge week in the W,
Yeah.
and we're going to bleed off with the not so undefeated Aces. The Aces were going for 8-0. They went into last night's game against the Suns 7-0. Everything was happy, everything was clicking, and DeWanna Bonner showed up and was kind of
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, you know how you played us the other night and you beat us quite well. Well, we're not going to let you do that this time." And she scored a career high 41 points, and her percentages are off the charts, like 71% from three, 70% from field goal and total. I mean, she was outstanding throughout this game.
That's what she does. I think as much as I wanted the Aces to go undefeated, everyone knows that. I think it's also interesting, and this is what makes the WNBA so exciting and fun, is you have people who step up. DeWanna's always been a superstar in this league, but 71%, I feel like she took the loss last year personal. And to start off the season, she was like, and they beat us again. It was almost like, everyone started talking about it and saying it. They could run this season. The Aces could be 40-0. And DeWanna Bonner was just like, back slap. Let me help y'all out. And she just elevated her game, which we've seen her do over and over again. And it was exciting to watch. I love seeing the highlights and the intensity in her eyes. She just was not going to be denied in that game. Even you stand up at 2 a.m. getting your heart broken.
Yeah, thanks for that. You know who I blame for this though?
Ooh,
Jeff,
I think
Jeff,
it's the people who were sitting there saying the Aces were going to go 40-0.
no,
You put a target on their back.
Jeff Van Gundy. That is who I blame. Yesterday, before the game, there was a post that got put out with him saying, "Oh yeah, the Aces are gonna like roll this season. Like they're undefeated, no problem." And literally within hours, the Sun took that away. I was gutted. See, I was quietly confident that we could,
Yes.
undefeated. I was playing it
Same.
down. However, we did have some scares this week for the
Mhm.
Aces. You know, the fever at the weekend. That game, by the way, that is actually one of my best games of the season so far,
Yes.
because that young fever team,
They were
give
sweet.
them if you can keep that team together for like a year or two, they're gonna be really tough to beat. I mean, they're tough to beat last weekend, and I've seen them
Yes.
their games a couple of times this season so far, and they look absolutely like immense. They
That game
try
against
so hard.
Chicago, that was crazy. That
That
was
was a
crazy.
that was another one. I mean, we'll talk about Chicago later, but like again, and I think a lot of this competition is to do with obviously having the Commissioner's Cup. I think that's a big part of it. It
Mhm.
makes these games competitive. No one's taking a night off, and it shows. Like it
Yeah.
shows massively. But my aces, your aces, yeah. I mean, I'm doing across the pond aces a little bit later on with Samantha. And obviously, we're going to have to dissect that game in detail and find out where it all went wrong. Um, it wasn't just Iwana Bonner. I mean, she was a
Yeah.
massive, massive part of that win.
Did it
And
go
it
wrong though? My thing was this. What went wrong? It was just, what do you do with 71% from the three?
play better defense.
That's not possible.
But this is the thing. I mean, one of the things I think Stokes, she was found
Right.
out last night because she was getting the ball at 3 point line so many times, and she's not a 3 point shooter. And I don't know how the plays were working, but every play there was about 3 or 4 plays in a row. She ended up the play had her on the 3 point line with the ball,
Mhm.
And, like,
To
you've only
try to
got, like
pull her man out, but if you're not a three-point shooter, that's not gonna be very effective. But that also
no.
means you're not gonna get much playing time. Can't pull
Yeah,
that defender.
yeah, and, this was the thing, she was actually on the floor a fair amount, but it just didn't work, and I didn't understand that that thinking because she's not like you say, she's not a three-point shooter. I mean, she would admit that herself, but yeah, so I was gutted last night or early this morning watching that game, because it was yeah, it wasn't fun. However, a fun team that have been great to watch have been the Chicago Sky.
Yes.
They have a bit of a surprise in their record, and they have some players on their roster like
Mhm.
Courtney Williams
Yes.
and Copper, and they've got two really young leaders. I mean, they are still young in terms of their career,
Mhm.
and you know, Copper's had Candice to learn from, Emma
Mhm.
Messiman, and a few others, and obviously Quigley and Courtney Vandersloot. So she's had these people around her to lead her and show her how it's done. And I really think that she's taken that mantle on this year. And I think James Wade is
Mhm.
giving his captains, his leaders, room to do that with this team.
One that's I think you just hit it on the head. One of the keys to Chicago's success, even though people were kind of like, we don't know how this team is going to go, is it seems like every season he's been able to put pieces together that work and he understands. He has a system in place and he knows who can fit those spots so that it brings the team to life. But he does a great job of also putting players in positions to be coaches on the floor and empowering them to kind of like you said, Copper's been learning for a while, but she also was a beast when they were there. So it's like who better to hand that torch to and begin teaching Boston because she's come in and just smoked the league. And it's been fun to watch. And now she's learning that leadership of what it looks like to transition from college to the WNBA. But she's got a lot of pieces around her, like you said, Elena Smith and other players on that team who know what it takes to win. Now that's going to bring her along even faster as well. But I think the key to it is Coach James Ward. He's amazing in terms of how he puts the team together every single season. And it doesn't matter who leaves. You lose Vandersloot, and he fills that spot right up with no problem. I also saw that $85 million evaluation too. The team did bring in 8 owners that were women. They're just it from top to bottom. This organization is doing a lot of great things.
They really are. I mean, one player that maybe gets a little missed out because you had Candice Parker, you had Vandersloot, you had Quigley,
Mhm.
is Emma Messiman, and Emma Messiman actually isn't playing in the WNBA this year. She's opted to play in Europe in EuroBasket,
Yeah,
which is obviously great for her. That's what she wants to do.
yeah.
Sad for us because we don't get to see her play, because she as well is one of these leaders that can really lead
Mhm.
the team, but I think you're right. I think James Wade has done a magnificent job putting this team together. I was a little critical after the WNBA Canada game in Toronto, when they let their rookie go because I was kind of like, "What? Why? Like, she just won you the game in Canada. Like,
Yeah.
she shown that she can win, and that was a competitive game. That might have been preseason, but those two teams were there to put on a show, and they did it very well. And she won them the game, and I was so confused, like, 4 days later when she got waived. I was like, "Nah, this isn't right." But, what do I know? James Wade has managed to put this team together,
Yeah.
and it is a magnificent team, and you look at the pieces on paper, and he seems to have meshed it quite well.
Absolutely. He's a great coach, great person. So I could totally see how the players want to run through walls and fight for him. So I think you brought up a great point with Emma Mizman. She's an amazing player, MVP, champion. There's so many things that she's done on her resume. I think that does hurt them in terms of having that veteran leadership that could bring them along quicker. And because they are going to be dependent on younger players. And at the end of the day, I've said this a million times. It'll be interesting come Commissioner's Cup and post Commissioner's Cup to see how those college players hold up in a season that is far faster and more physical than the college game. Right now, they're doing great, and it's amazing, and the excitement is there. You know how you have that adrenaline? I feel like that's there. I think Boston's going to show up no matter what, but it'll be interesting to see who holds up and who doesn't in terms of the length of the season, especially with the extension. I really want to see how teams that are dependent on younger players like them in the Fever, how they hold up long term.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, them and the Fever, pretty much what we thought would be rebuild teams, but they're making both of these teams are making themselves not look like rebuild teams. And I mean, we've even seen the Fever drop wave a couple of first round picks that they've had over the last couple
Absolutely.
of years. So it's been immense, and I think it's been a great start. And I think it adds to the excitement of the league,
Yes.
which I think is is always going to be a good thing. Now, Michelle, did you know that come I think we're sitting on the 10th of June or whatever it is now. In 4 days will be our third year anniversary of when we put out our first episode. And one thing which I can't believe, but one thing that we've always done is a player spotlight. And we
Mhm.
spotlight a player that, big performance or, been in the news or something along those lines or had a
Mhm.
magnificent career and we just want to talk about them. So this week, I thought we'd talk about Carly Samuelson. Carly Samuelson is playing for the Sparks.
Yeah.
I'm not very happy right now because she was on a hardship contract because the
Yeah.
Sparks needed players, and when you've got so many injuries, the WNBA allows you to have these hardship contracts. On Monday, she was released from her hardship contract, which I was gutted about because on fantasy, I was getting a lot of points from her, to be fair, and really enjoying it. But she left, so I dropped her from my fantasy team. On Tuesday, she was then signed to a season long contract.
Yes.
Thanks so much for that. And before I knew it, somebody else had picked her up on the fantasy league. So thanks for that. However, one thing that I kind of draws me to Carly is because she also plays for Great Britain, which is great.
Mhm.
Her mum is British, her dad American, and obviously you've got her sister Katie, who's
Mhm.
pregnant just now, who was one of the players that was out, which is why she had that hardship contract in the
Mhm.
beginning. But one thing that she has been able to do throughout her career is show up on teams and help them wherever they have needed like they have a gap. She's been able to go into Los Angeles on a couple of occasions, Dallas, Seattle, uh, and help out wherever needed. And it seems to have kind of paved her way that so that she can now get this full year contract. So she doesn't have to worry that she's going to get dropped next week and try and find another spot on another team. But one thing that she's made herself very accessible to teams. She is a two-time Spanish National League champion, Belgian National League champion as well, which is awesome. So she's been doing it in Europe for a while, and like I say, she plays for Great Britain as well. But like, how important is it for someone like Carly to finally get that contract and have that like security
Mhm.
behind her? Because and during the hardship contract, she was really putting up some big numbers.
I think it's instrumental to the league. When you think about fans, players, parents who are thinking about their kid being able to play in the league, we all think our kid is LeBron, Kobe, but those dynamic teams that win, they always have those role players. And sometimes that isn't the second man, sometimes it's the sixth, seventh, or eighth. I think Carly has done an amazing job of coming in off of the bench for teams. And although the numbers in the past may not have been like the 20-point games, her numbers are instrumental. And one of the crazy parts that people miss out on is she shows her character, her hard work, and one of the most fascinating facts is she was actually leading the league, shooting 80.9%, leading all WNBA players. And although her minutes were limited, what that says is even from the 2-point game, she's shooting 56. From the three, she's shooting 58.8%. It shows that she's efficient. She isn't that player that is waiting to get more minutes to show up. Like, she's working on her game and she's earned that opportunity. And the best part is you can probably feel that tension building in a player because she's one of those players that doesn't have to get ready; she stays ready. So she earned that contract. And to me, I love that you made her a player that we highlighted this week because that is what the league is about. And those are the opportunities that if more people focus on those, they could probably last and get contracts and stay on teams a lot longer than trying to be that big fish all the time. It's a ton of roles, or there are far more roles on a team where you need to just add value. And that's what she does. And she does it in a big way. I could totally see her breaking into the league and getting into a starting lineup and truly making even more of a difference on teams as she gets the experience behind her playing in the WNBA league as well. I mean, she's a beast already in Britain. I mean, you guys should be really, really proud of her.
Yeah, it's awesome that we get to have her, play for
Yes.
Great Britain. But I think as well, like when I've seen her play, and I've seen her play throughout the years, like you say, like she will not play big minutes, but it's the minutes that she does play. She takes full advantage of them,
Yeah.
and I think her defense is awesome.
Yes.
Like she is like a dog with a bone. She will not. I mean, if you're getting past her, you're doing a really good job because she's not someone who's just going to like step on by. She will make you work for those points.
Hmm.
So I think on both ends of the floor, she is efficient, and I think that's shown throughout the years, and even in Europe as well. Like her efficiency is pretty high up there,
It is.
and I think I would love, and I kind of said this a while back, like when the Aces, when we were looking at the Aces, we were looking at like the
Hmm.
starting five, but the bench was looking a little thin. I said like,
You did.
what about Carly Samuelson? Like she would be pretty decent to have in there. We never went that route, but how cool is it though that her sister's pregnant,
Yeah.
living in LA, and she now gets that stability as well. Like she's there with her sister, and her sister's getting to hang out and obviously be very pregnant. But like that must be a unique situation as well. That she's kind of in there covering for her sister.
I think it's a WNBA dream. Those are the stories that inspire the next generation and the young ladies who, you may have a sibling that's better than you, but it doesn't mean that you can't find your way and figure out how to stand out in your own way. And I love the fact that the opportunity came when her sister was pregnant. Who would have thought? And I think it reminds us to never stop dreaming and never stop working on the things that you really, really want. She believed and wanted to be a great player. Even when she didn't get an opportunity in Vegas, she still was there supporting her sister. And when her day came, she didn't say, let me go get ready. She walked right through that door and said, this is my time. And it paid off because it went from that, like you said, that hardship contract that's temporary to a year-long contract. And I think those are the stories and the opportunities that remind young people to keep dreaming.
Oh, definitely, and I think she's a prime example of that as well. Now, something you could maybe do now is, we have All Star Weekend fast approaching, which seems weird because the season's just begun. But voting has begun for All Star. All Star's going to be in Las Vegas this year. Carly Samuelson is one of those players that you could vote for, but um, we will pop up the links on description and on social media so people can go and vote as well. But how important is it still to have? I mean, the men's the NBA's All Star Weekend is it has some issues, but what we've seen from the WNBA's All Star Weekend is they're not there to mess around or make up numbers. Like
Mhm.
those games have been competitive, especially a couple of years ago before the Olympics. Like we seen how competitive that was. I mean, that was intense.
It was intense and fun. I love watching the coaches like get into it, get in players' faces. I was like, y'all realize this doesn't count towards the season. But for the fans to be able to have all of your favorite players on the floor, some of them on the same team, competing against each other, I think that's what it's about. I love the community aspect that the WNBA brings to it, where they bring the fans and the kids in the community around as well, and you get to see some of your favorite players in action. But the competition back during the Olympics, when they brought in They brought in all of the OG players and showed them love with the top, 50 players. So you saw the torch between the old and the new and the respect that was there. But then you turned around and saw those players go bananas on the court and actually beat, our Olympic team. And you saw that they came ready to play and they had a point to prove. And that's what the fans love to see, is that on any given day, anybody can win. So people are going to be excited about this year's WNBA. And I think the WNBA will continue to lead the way in terms of sports and how things are done.
Yeah, All Star is going to be awesome. We are going to try and be there. I have some presence there as well, as we did in Canada with the game in Toronto with the Sky and the Lynx. But one thing I love about All Star, and you spoke about it a bit there, is you have the best players in the league all coming together.
Mhm.
And it kind of takes me back to the 90s with the NBA, where, you know, it did actually count for something. Like people would go out and like, I'm not, we might not be on the same team, but I'm still going to go at you. Like, and with the WNBA, that's what I see. Like, I see players like just going at each other,
Yeah.
and it's great to see because you see that competitiveness, but at
Mhm.
the end of it, you also see that kind of camaraderie as well. Like, okay, you got me, kind of thing. So I very much like the way they're running All Star. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in Vegas. Vegas over the next couple of weeks and months is going to be exceptionally busy. They've got Formula One races happening there. They've got the Aces. They've got the Golden Knights and the Stanley Cup playoffs, finals, and all this kind of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of that works out. But All Star will be fun. And I think what we'll probably do is we'll probably try and show our All Star teams as we run up to All Star weekend as well. Now, one thing that I wasn't aware of until very recently was a particular award. Now, this award was given to Kelsey Mitchell of the Indiana Fever
Yeah.
for her work in her home community in Connecticut. So it is, and I can find it, the Dawn Staley Community Leadership Award for positive impact and dedication in the community. And the award was obviously named after Dawn Staley, as I've mentioned, and it was created to recognize a player who best exemplifies the characteristics of a leader in the community and where they work and live. The award is to reflect Staley's spirit, leadership, charitable efforts, love for the game, and an inspirational presence to the community. Mitchell has been a big part of the Fever for the last few years. And how important is it that we highlight these particular awards? We kind of see them with the NBA on a kind of backslide. They're more Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, all this kind of stuff. But how important is it that this time of year we get to see these kind of awards being given?
I think they're very important for several reasons. It's like you said, one, you see people who are traveling all the time, and that's the one thing I love about Kelsey's foundation is Kels Hoop Foundation. When you look at the amount of work that she's done to inspire and encourage student athletes who have limited opportunities in their communities, and just serving those underserved through her philanthropic work, I think that's a big deal. When you look at all the things that she does off the court, in addition to having to stay on top of her game, how she leverages her athletic platform to also be an advocate for those who may not have the same access that she does. But I couldn't believe all the stuff that she was doing. You got family, you got friends, you're on the road, you got a million people calling you, you have rehab film. Like, it's intense. I think most people will find it quite difficult to keep up with an athletic schedule of a pro athlete. And yet she still finds the time to say, hey, I'm gonna go and do, let's see, she did the season of giving dinner, she did the Million Meal Marathon, she's done the big toy giveaway, the junior NBA event, Dick's Sporting Goods, Shop with the Pro, the Kroger Shoe giveaway, and it goes on in terms of what she is able to do. And I think the fact that she's passionate about giving back to her community is a big deal, because I think, one, it gives the next generation someone to look up to, and it also establishes the expectations for you once you make it. Like to take on that torch and say I'm going to bring others along with me is a huge deal, and I think Don Staley led the way with that. So I'm glad the award is named after her because as a coach, look at what Don did, sending everyone a piece of the championship net that hung
Yeah.
off the. I thought that was huge, and it was just her making other people a part of the process and showing them how important they were, and also setting the expectations for them as well as coaches. So to see it filtering down to the player level as well, it's amazing. And hopefully, young people take advantage of these opportunities to see what it is like to be a pro athlete, and others also respect and show love to Kelsey for all that she's done with her foundation and the extra work that she's putting in off the court to make sure the community continues to thrive.
I remember when I looked through the list, you went through you only went touched on some of them,
Yes.
the things that she's done. But you're right, like you're like, okay, so you're playing, you're training, you're potentially rehabbing, doing film, doing this, that, and everything else. But you take time to go to Connecticut and work in the community, and I think that should be celebrated now more than ever, because I think, especially with the growth of the WNBA, more people watching it than ever before, that now is the time, like for young girls and boys,
Yeah.
to have access to these players and learn from them, look up to them. Like how, I mean, I think she's perfect role
Yeah.
model for young people, and hopefully, you know, say in 10, 15 years time, like you hear of a player who's kind of been influenced by Kelsey and who's played in the WNBA at that point because you know Kelsey made it look achievable.
Yes.
As long as you work hard and you know you kind of follow in that example. So I think it's excellent that she got that award, and excellent that we get to highlight it as well. So I think the WNBA and marketing and putting these things out there now is getting a lot better this year. I have to say, because in previous years it's been a little slow, but really happy that we're getting to highlight these kind of stories as well. So let's have a look at the week ahead. Um, is there any particular games this week that you are really looking forward to watching?
For me, it was the Minnesota Lynx and the Indiana Fever today at 5. I believe it's at 5.
I think it is, yeah.
Yes, because I think that's going to be a good game. One, I get to watch the Indiana Fever again, but Minnesota will be a good task for them. I think Minnesota, they're at home. They need a win. They're an experienced team. And then you have this hot, I mean, Indiana's coming in like, we don't care what you need. We are coming to show you that young Bucks can come in this league and step up immediately and right away. So it'll be interesting because you got Sylvia Fowles, who's doing the retirement run. She's getting her highlight and her flowers. And I don't know about you, but I want to see the big B Sylvia Fowles versus Aaliyah Boston. It's going to be a great game. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. And yeah, it'll be nice to see Sylvie Fells back on court.
Yes.
Having her getting her flowers and stuff as well. So I have opted for Sunday night's game, and I did this before last night's loss to Connecticut because I really felt that Chicago, and I still do think this, Chicago were a big threat to the Aces
Mhm.
because of the way James Wade has got the sky running. So I'm looking forward to that game. I think that's going to be a tough test, especially coming off after that loss to Connecticut. So looking forward to it. I think it'll be
Mm.
fun. I think it'll be back and forth. Um, but I do think that the Aces will they'll have to put the foot down after that loss the other night. I think they have to put the foot down, and you know, unfortunately for the Sky, that could be a heavy defeat.
I got a question for you on that.
Oh,
Knowing that the Aces just had the loss to Connecticut, how does Chicago leverage that? Like you were saying, seeing how they're pulling out Kia Stokes, like all of those things are out there now. And every team is going to be watching that game and seeing how they can also um, at least put themselves in a position to win against the Aces. Don't get me wrong, they got a ton of firepower, but I would love to know, like, what are some of the takeaways that the Aces are gonna have to look into and figure out how do we make up for this so that teams don't continue to take advantage of it?
I think one is Kia Stokes not having her on the 3 point line with the ball. I mean, I think it happens so many times against the Connecticut Sun. The Aces need to change that, and if they don't, the Sky have a good blueprint. Let's get Kia Stokes out on that 3 point line because she's going to have to pass it because there was so many interceptions during that Connecticut Sun game because like Kia's and I felt bad. I actually felt bad for her because I was like, you're leaving her out on an island all the way on her own. The other thing is, I think we need to. I think the Aces need to look for the next pass instead of looking to shoot all the time. And I understand that we have a team
Mhm.
of leaders. I mean, you look at that starting five. It is a team of
Yeah,
leaders and a team of MVPs.
yeah.
Um, and I think
Mm,
sometimes they want to take it on their shoulders to relieve everyone else.
mm,
But I think what they need to do is be looking for that extra pass. Because I think just now it's like, I've got the ball. It's an all right shot. I'll just put it up anyway.
yeah,
And I think that's really, especially playing against Connecticut, you couldn't do that. And I
mm,
think Chicago will come in with that defensive mindset. Let's
yeah,
shut down the passing lanes and force them to shoot. Because when Connecticut did that, it worked for them. So yeah, you've got a couple of things there this Chicago and James Wade. They've all been watching that game. I
yeah.
mean, they've been watching the previous games as well, but they'll be watching that and thinking, yeah, we can probably hang in there, and you never know, squeak a win.
And they're a great defensive team. That's the other part. Is I love Chicago's defense and the way that they play, and if they can force that, I think it takes one possessions away. And if you're not making that extra pass, you're not making Chicago play defense. And what does Chicago excel at? Transition and getting out and running. So I think you're dead on. Those will be some of the things to watch and see, follow that stat sheet and see how the teams kind of adjust.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got Copper and you've got Williams like bombing it down the lanes, and I think at one point against the Sun, like there was for me as well from the Aces a little bit of defeatist attitude towards the end of the game, which
Mhm.
I didn't like too much. So
Okay.
I'm hoping that Becky has drilled that out of them, because otherwise, if that kind of thing starts to seep into a team, then that can be really detrimental down the stretch.
Hmm. And they have a lot of, I mean, like you said, they have a lot of personalities, and there's a mesh of very good players on that team. And although we're, kind of like everyone was saying, oh, they can go 40 straight. And I was like, it's possible. But that means you also have to mesh some very big personalities together so that you get the extra pass and that people become selfless and don't feel like they have to take things on.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing for the Aces. Like, let's look for the extra pass. Let's make more space,
Hmm.
because you make more space, you get open shots, and you've got a better chance of making them than having a hand in your face. So, I know I could never do that. So that's just me. But Michelle, thank you again for this week. We will be back next week with another episode. Um, all about the W and what's been going on over the last week. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and we will see you all very soon.